Hi, welcome to Iowa City's Other News on this beautiful October 4th of 2003. This is why we live in Iowa for days like this. I'm Teresa Seeberger, your host, and the name of today's show, the title is Being Gay in Iowa City, Is It Safe? And what prompted us to do this particular show is that we became aware, in particular Stephen Canner, who's one of the collective members, and he's also on the Iowa City Council. He became aware a couple weeks ago of a situation here in Iowa City that involved an assault that was based on, I guess, basically it would be classified as a hate crime. It was based on, hatred or ill feelings towards gay people. It's yet to be seen, I believe, if the county attorney's office is going to file it as a hate crime. But based on the information we have, we certainly believe that hate is an element of what happened that evening. However, out of respect for the people involved, the victims and some of the witnesses, we're not going to be delving into the specifics of that incident today. Rather, we're just going to touch on the community issue here in Iowa City of, is it safe to be gay? How are gays treated? What resources do not only gays but transsexuals, bisexuals, transgender, what resources do they have in Iowa City if a situation arises where they feel they need assistance? And as part of our show today, we have two great guests with us to talk about these issues. The first one is Laura Crosley. She's with the Iowa City Anti-Violence Project. And we also have Galen Newton. He's with an organization that we call GLSEN, which stands for Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. So why don't we go ahead and talk with, I guess, Laura's to my immediate right here, ask her about the Iowa City Anti-Violence Project, kind of what her involvement is and how it got started and what it's all about.
Sure. Well, the Iowa City Anti-Violence Project is just a group of folks in the community who got together. It's a total grassroots organization that got together in response to a variety of hate crimes that have been happening in Iowa City. And it's one of the things that I think happens a lot of times around issues like this is that something will go on, but mostly things end up being unreported. And so it ends up being part of the community's responsibility to step up and support people and then think of ways that you can, as a community, deal with what's happening. So what's been happening in Iowa City has been sort of a rash of incidents of violence against queer people, and in all kinds of forms, anywhere from just harassment on the street, which is really pretty common and almost never reported, all the way up to physical attacks or sexual assault for being queer. And the Anti-Violence Project, when we first met, we got together and groups of people segmented off on different projects that they wanted to work on. And so that's now going on and taking place.
Okay. So if someone is the victim of some sort of harassment, what's the kind of the report mechanism, or how would they know about you?
Well, I guess the way that we started, we just started a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay, great.
It's a very, very new thing. This is all in response to things that are happening right now.
Okay.
And so how it originally started out is that somebody went out and they put up some posters, some flyers around town, just calling out, getting memos out. And I think people were chalking the sidewalks and letting people know. Right. I'm also the owner of Ruby's Pearl, which is our feminist and queer sex shop here in Iowa City. Right. And we serve as a community spot for people to flyer and to get information out. So, and then the word just spread, and it went through the GLBTU and the university, and students came, and
right.
So it's a good network for students and Iowa City long-term community members to talk about what's happening.
Okay, great. And I'll just kind of bring Galen in now so we can talk about GLSEN, which Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network.
Yes.
Why don't I have you talk about what your involvement is and what that's all about?
Well, GLSEN is really an education network that deals specifically with GLBT, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender issues within K through 12 schools. So they really are, they're an education organization first, but they deal specifically with getting things like policies put into place, anti-harassment trainings, getting resources available to students within those schools. So that's what they sort of work on. Their mission is to really make schools safe for people in the queer community. The Iowa City chapter is only like a year and a half old. It just got started, so it's still like sort of developing and building itself up. But we're working in sort of a unique situation here in Iowa City because the public school district does have an anti-harassment policy, and it was one of the first in the state. But that just means we sort of really have to assess and define what the needs of this particular community is when it comes to gay issues. I got involved with GLSEN in a Des Moines chapter a couple years ago, so and when I was in high school, and it just has sort of snowballed from there, and now we're sort of here in Iowa City, ready to get going. So.
Right, okay, great. I just want to touch on one thing because both of you have said this, and it was talked about a little bit before we started the show, that if I'm walking down the street or you're walking down the street or whoever, and someone says, hey, you frickin' queer, that's, they're making fun of us, they're harassing us, whatever. But you both use the word queer freely to describe at least the gay community, maybe bisexual. And for a lot of people that might seem odd. You want to just talk? I'm not saying it's odd to me. I'm just saying for a lot of people that, on the one hand it's harassment, on the other hand it's something used comfortably. Can you just address?
Yeah. Well, it totally depends on like how it's being used and who's using it. I think that's part of it. Like queer and dyke and words like cunt are all words that in my personal life that I've used as reclamations. Those are words that like have been used against women and queer folk all around, like for ages, but not like the history. If you look at those words, doesn't necessarily have to be negative, and so it's a very empowering thing for somebody like me to be able to take any of those words on. So yeah.
So kind of reclaiming.
Oh yeah, and I have a whole slew of them that I like to like spring on people.
Okay. Okay. Good for you.
I completely agree. There's a lot of words, even the word gay for a long time, that's so gay. It really sort of depends on how that's used. And there are a lot of words. The other thing is just being sort of conscious of what the meaning of those words and how you're using it and how they're perceived. For example, the word dyke, I might be careful about saying that in front of some of my lesbian friends that don't really know me that well, but people that I'm closer with who use that word more freely. So it really depends on the situation and the context to which it's being used.
Right. Yeah, I remember there's a small anecdote. I went to Grinnell College many years ago, back in the 80s when things weren't as, quite as good. And one of the gals on our team, she started a cheer. Not that everyone on the team was gay, of course, but the cheer was DYKES. That's what makes our team the best.
Yeah.
That was a fun one.
Well, you should be interested in the radical cheerleaders.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
They do
yes.
some cool stuff on that.
Yeah. Anyhow, I think maybe this might be a good time to touch on just laws across the United States and then obviously we're going to get back to local issues. But it's interesting to be able to see how the whole nation is going as far as at least enacting laws, hate crimes that include sexual orientation. And I don't know if Adam has the graphic up there where we're going to flash the entire United States on the screen. And as you can see, and actually the black states include not only hate crimes based on sexual orientation, but also gender identity, which would be transgender. So it's amazing that there are even several states that include the transgender and the hate crime. And then the black and the gray are basically the states that you're going to see, and there's 29 total that encompass hate crimes based on either the sexual orientation or the gender identity. And I don't know about each year, but we're slowly but surely coming along. And New York State, it was 2000, I think the year 2000, when they were added on, which is kind of surprising because I guess you'd think of New York as being a little progressive. But in Iowa, we've had it for quite some time now, several years. So that's just a kind of an interesting map to look at to see how the nation is going. Might be interesting to compare that, but we don't have the red and blue states, as far as Democrat, Republican. But anyhow, and also various cities continue to enact their own, like Kansas City, Kansas, continue to act their own statutes or local ordinances to provide additional protections. But one of the things you had talked about, Laura, which is key, and which is where you come in groups, like both of your groups, is that, as you said, even though these states have statutes that say it's illegal to commit these offenses, the amount of underreporting, it's kind of like rape and domestic abuse. You're just not getting
Yeah.
the people. I mean, what do you think that people are, I guess, distrustful of the system or afraid of being re-victimized? I mean, what's your opinion
Yeah.
as to why there's the underreporting?
I mean, well, I think it's lots of things. Like, I mean, on one
Go ahead.
on one hand, like there is the sense that that as like, I'm sorry, but I was losing my train of
Oh,
thought.
it's okay.
But underreporting happens for like a variety of reasons, and it could be like as a victim, it's really hard to retell your story so many times, and if you go through the legal process, you have to do that over and over and over again, and even then you're going to be judged by a group of people who aren't necessarily going to be empathetic or understand or at the same time think that something else happened. Another thing is that like harassment, for instance, is so commonplace. It happens all the time that like it just becomes part of like this normalization. Even though it's not okay, it's like the way that violence is incorporated into our culture is so normalized that people are like, well, they're just one of the, if you tried to report everything that happened all the time, I mean, you'd just be like in the police office all the time, just being like, okay, it happened again,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, there's that crazy chick who has a problem,
Yeah,
So yeah,
okay.
I think that's part of it.
Right, okay. Just to kind of go to a different segment, or not segment, but earlier this week, a couple of us went out and interviewed some people on the streets, asking them some questions about how they feel about, gay rights and safety in Iowa City, et cetera. So why don't we go ahead and show one of those videos right now, and we can talk about it in a few minutes. Oh, maybe not quite. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, now let's roll to it if we can.
Camera again, on camera again. Can you tell us your name, please?
Liz.
And where do you live, Liz, in Iowa City?
I live at Quadrangle.
Quadrangle. And the first question is, do you think homosexuals and heterosexuals should be allowed equal rights in all areas of society, for example, in marriage and jobs and housing?
Yes.
Do you think discrimination against gays exists in Iowa City and University of Iowa?
It could. I mean, I don't know. Most of my friends are equal about gays and homosexuals or whatever, but it probably exists. I don't know. Too many people who hate gays though.
Do you think that gays have to be fearful in Iowa City of physical assault or at the University of Iowa?
No, I don't think they should be. Everyone here is really friendly. Everyone I've met is great. This campus is like the greatest campus ever. I love it here, so I don't think they should have anything to fear.
Liz, where are you from originally? Is Gurnee, Illinois, is there discrimination there, you think, against gays or fear of physical assault?
I think there's somewhat discrimination against gays there, but it's nothing great like it's here. It's pretty much the same town. It's a somewhat upper class society. There's not too much discrimination.
And do you have any final comments on this subject?
Not really. No, I just think that everyone should have equal rights. I know there's a lot of controversy about it, but I think they should have the same rights as everyone else.
Thanks a lot. Let me give you a card,
Okay.
and if you'd like, you could watch us. Question is, let me ask you, what's your name, please?
Adam Durr.
Adam, and where do you live in Iowa City?
I live at Mayflower Dorms.
Adam, the first question is, do you think homosexuals and heterosexuals should be allowed equal rights in all areas of society? This would include things like marriage, jobs, housing.
I think it's their business and they should do whatever they want to do.
So equal rights for all?
Yes.
Now, do you think that gay folks in Iowa City and the University of Iowa face discrimination?
You know, I don't know any gays in particular, so I can't really answer that.
Okay.
I mean, as far as I know, I don't think they do.
And where are you from originally?
Springfield, Missouri.
Springfield, Missouri. Do you think the same level of acceptance is in Springfield, Missouri for gay people? As far as not facing discrimination like here in Iowa City?
I don't think there's any discrimination anywhere that I'm aware of that I've been so far.
Okay.
So,
Any final comments on this subject?
everyone should just live in peace and harmony.
All
That's about it.
Thank you for being on the show.
Okay. Since I was talking with you, Laura, I'll go to Galen now initially just to get his comments. And, you know, the people that were interviewed seemed to indicate, and presumably they're not gay, I don't know, but they seem to indicate that they're not really aware of problems, gay bashing, et cetera. So where is it coming from that it is occurring?
Well, I think the first thing that I want to say is the fact that they are unaware, I think that's the problem. It seemed to me like that first soundbite that you had from that girl, she just really had no sort of idea of what's going on. It seemed to me that she probably didn't know a lot of gay people or people in the queer community. And so with that sort of mindset, it's kind of hard to see what it's like to live in the life of someone who is in that community. And the second guy, he even said that he didn't know any gay people. I mean, it's Iowa City. We're known for sort of being a diverse and open community when it comes to the GLBT groups of people. And in that sense, it's sort of like demonstrating a sense of like isolation and really sort of that like mainstream college students are really not being exposed. And when they are, it's coming out in sort of like a hatred or a hateful way.
Okay.
Well, and
Laura?
it's interesting because, yeah, Iowa City on a whole can be like a really friendly place and people can be really friendly. But then you get downtown in the bar scene on, you know, a Thursday through Saturday night from any time period, and like people get drinking, it's their first time they're out, they don't have their parents around, they get all riled up, and then all of a sudden, like, what do you know, like a hate crime has occurred. And it only takes like one person to do that, to change another person's life forever. I mean, like, it's not like you can't keep on living, and you can't, like, you won't, you know, you will, or people will try. But that impact is always going to be there, you know? And so, like, yeah, their friends might be great people, but it only takes, like, one creepoid to, like, really take advantage of the situation, and then, like, that changes the course of another person's life. And I think it's really interesting, too, because it's similar to, like, if you talk with women, like, a lot of times, like, you'll meet women, and it always shocks and amazes me because I think because of the work that I do, like, I tend to be really involved with survivors of sexual violence, so, or, like, child abuse, and like, you'll talk with people sometimes, and a woman will be like, well, I just don't understand, like, I mean, I've never been harassed, or nothing's ever happened to me, or none of my friends have. But statistically, and that's like reported statistically, it's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men who have been either victims of child abuse or sexual assault during their lives at some point. And so it's people not talking, like they don't know, like it's not part of your conversation, you know, you don't go to see the next movie that came out by Hollywood and then come out and be like, yeah, and last week I got attacked by this like, guy, and, you know, or like this happened 20 years ago, or, you know, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of like hidden aspects to it. And there's also this like crazy misconception, I think, that if it's not in the news, if it's not being reported, if it's not in your face every single day, all the time, then it's not happening. You know, and I think that's like a real societal problem. To have that going on.
Kind of an invisibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just want to take a break here for a moment to remind people that we are watching Iowa City's Other News on October 4th, 2003, and actually we will be re-airing on this coming Wednesday, excuse me, at 10 p.m., and then the following Wednesday at 10 p.m. also, and then next Saturday at 11 a.m. we'll re-air the show. And we are talking today about being gay in Iowa City. Is it safe? And I'm here with my guests, of course, Galen Newton and Laura Crosley. And one thing I wanted to touch upon that you were kind of not necessarily alluding to, but it reminded me of a situation recently. The Full Monty, either it was in town or it's still here, I'm not sure. I can't afford to go to it. But there was a mass email apparently sent out throughout the university to try to make sure that sales were good, apparently. And there were words in this email that apparently went through the VP's office at the University of Iowa, words to the effect that this isn't a strip show, so for the ladies, they'll be disappointed, but the men will be relieved. And as someone, the person who told me about this pointed out that that's essentially assuming that we're 100% heterosexuals, that all women are going to want to see a strip show of these men and no men. And so that's part of the, I guess what I call invisibility problem, which you're kind of talking about. If people aren't, I mean, so many people say, oh, I don't know anybody that's gay. And that's almost impossible in Iowa City. Yeah. So how do you feel like that contributes? I mean, I guess you've said that that's part of the problem. That's what contributes.
Oh, definitely. And I think that those sort of things actually have just as a damaging effect as being outright homophobic, because it's almost subconscious. You're taught in French class to talk about your girlfriend if you're a guy or your boyfriend if you're a girl, and you really, so it becomes just so routine and embedded in your daily life, that it's really hard. And that, you know, I think every sort of social movement sort of deals with that. There's things about race, like really subtle, you know, like the lighter your skin, you know, the more attractive you are. That's kind of a racist but not really overt sort of statement to make. And likewise, the gay community has to deal with that also. And I see a real shift, I see a real shift in the queer movement to start addressing those issues and really helping the gay community become more visible when it comes to things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any further comments?
I totally think that's great.
Okay. Just as a question that and this is being stereotypical on my part, stereotyping, but do you either of you think that either the presence of or just the existence of fraternities and sororities, do you feel that that in any way contributes to the problem of either just not acknowledging that gays are there or any harassment? Or is that not a fair?
I'm not sure. Are you saying that like having the fraternities and sororities increases like the amount of violence towards people, or what is it?
Or I guess particular, I would think fraternities, and that's I'm doing a stereotype, but because I'm trying to get feedback on if you think that's a factor.
Well, it's hard to say. I think like I found out one time when I was in school that like the actual percentage of folks that are in fraternities and sororities, it's like, I mean, it's way, way low. I mean, when I go out on campus, if I were to sit there and like sit and pick out and be like, that's a frep boy and that's a frep, it turns out that it's only like 5% of the population are actually in fraternities and sororities. But that's not to say that that it's not like a center for something like bigger. And I think like, I mean, I'm not really involved in that culture, but I think fraternities and sororities have a lot to do with money and have a lot to do with your background that you come from and all kinds of privileges that end up being a part of that. And yeah, there's a lot of discrimination on like who gets to be in the sorority or fraternity. And so I think that there's like an active participant in like just their selection process that is already discriminatory, and it like uses different levels of privilege to keep people out. So yeah, I mean, I think just like the ideas behind that might be more so. I mean, I wish that like sororities were all about like power to the sisters and like sisterhood, you know, but, and I actually don't know, like, and I imagine that they vary from one to another.
Right.
That some are more competitive and and I think self-defeating, and others are more like, yeah, we just like want to bring in the sisterhood. And I think it changes that with sororities and fraternities that are based more on like race or different sort of politics that come in also.
Okay. Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts
I
about
would
that?
agree. I would agree that there might be some norms or some culture within that system that sort of encourages sort of weeding out or picking on, the people to sort of feel like they're a group of people. But at the same time, I think there's a great opportunity within sororities and fraternities to be inclusive of the GLBT community. Sororities and fraternities do a lot of really good service work, and that's an organization that some GLBT people might want to participate in, and they have a real opportunity to sort of get people to be involved in their fraternity or their sorority that might not be the stereotypical frat boy or sorority girl.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to look at some more videos here in a minute. I think a few more interviews that were done on the street just to get some more feedback from local folks on these issues. Are we ready to roll the tape? Okay, why don't you go ahead and roll that, please.
First, let me ask, what's your name, please, and where do you live here in Iowa City?
My name's Heath Molnax, and I live at Mayflower.
I'm Jim Hilton, and I'm Heath's roommate at Mayflower.
And I'm Jason, and I live at Mayflower also.
The first question we're asking is, do you think homosexuals and heterosexuals should be allowed equal rights in all areas of our society, such as in housing and in marriage?
No, I don't think so. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Tough question.
Going with me being religious, I'm going to have to say that I'm not really fond of the homosexuality business, but I guess that's their choice, and we can't really discriminate them for how they want to be, but that's not something I'm in favor in, no.
Okay.
I'd have to agree with him. I'm not in favor of it, but I guess it's their choice, so.
All right. The second question is, do you think that there's discrimination against gays in Iowa City and the University of Iowa? We'll start over here.
I haven't seen too much just since I've been here, because I'm just a freshman. I haven't seen too much since I've been here, so I don't know. I don't think there is.
And before we go on, the second part of the question is, where are you from originally, and do you think there's discrimination in your hometown?
I'm from Glenwood, Iowa, and I haven't seen much discrimination against homosexuals in Glenwood, so that's just about it.
Like he said, being a freshman, I haven't seen a whole lot of any discrimination towards anybody yet. I mean, so I would say that I haven't seen any, and I'm from Glenwood, Iowa as well, and I have not noticed any discrimination towards homosexuals there either, or homosexuality. So.
I'm from Glenwood also. Back in our hometown, there's not any that I ever noticed, but here I've seen like maybe one or two examples, but nothing more than that. So there's probably more, but.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the examples you saw? What were they?
I just heard some bad remarks toward people that, I don't know, people must have thought were homosexuals, or maybe they were just calling them that, but like, I don't know if I should say it on TV, but
That's okay.
fags and queer and stuff like that, but other than that.
Do you think that gay folks in Iowa City and the University of Iowa have to fear physical assault?
Again, no, they shouldn't have to fear physical assault. I mean, people shouldn't take it that far. It's their choice, and so just that.
It's not something that should be feared, but it is something that does happen. So, I mean, I guess it comes down to who you're with and where you're at and stuff like that. I mean, if you get around some drunk people or something that don't really have any inhibitions about what they're doing, then maybe there could be a problem there. But it's not something that I would think should cause violence. I mean, it's their choice, but I'm sure it does happen and has happened. So.
Do you think it'd be all right if two men or two women walked down the street holding hands?
I mean, I know they're gonna get looks and stuff, and you know that's what they want to do. I mean, this is a free country, and it doesn't say anything about being gay or anything in the Constitution. So if two guys or two girls want to walk down the street holding hands, then that's their choice, and there's nothing that anybody should do about it because it's land of the free. So.
Any final comments on the issue?
I just going with what he said. I've seen people walking around holding hands and nothing's happened to them that I've seen. So, but like he said, with drunk people around all the time, it's probably something that should be feared. Well, that could happen, but it shouldn't have to happen. But I haven't seen anything happen so far, so that's it.
Thank you. Any final thoughts? Thanks a lot for stopping here.
Thanks for having us.
Let me give you a card.
How appropriate that the sirens were going in the background. It's like coming to the scene of a, I mean,
Yeah.
the people that we just saw, it seems like there was some odd sort of struggle that they feel on the one hand that gay people should have rights and be able to do things, but I felt a sense with them that they're really putting gays into a category and that they don't really approve of what gays are doing, but it's okay, you know, they can do it. What do you think, Lauren and Galen, either one of you? Just what were your senses?
Well, the first thing I kind of noticed, it's interesting, and I'm wondering how these people would have responded to those questions had they been interviewed alone. And I think it's interesting that when you get people into groups, their attitudes sort of change based on fitting in with their peers. So you had two sound bites from people who were alone, and it seemed like they were able to sort of like accept it. There still seemed to be some, you know, ambiguity as far as what it really means to give rights to gay people or the queer community. And here, yeah, there was a sort of odd struggle. They didn't really care what other people do, but at the same time they didn't approve of it. But if you don't approve of it, you really are kind of caring about what people do. And they kind of, again, it was kind of just this sort of lack of knowledge about what's going on. And one of the people said, well, you know, maybe you shouldn't, you know, if you're walking home late at night or something and there's a bunch of drunk people. Well, that in itself, I don't think the straight community really understands that. As a gay person of color, I'm always constantly aware of my surroundings. I know who's walking behind me. I know who's in front of me. I know that there's a big group of guys over there that I want to avoid. That's something that's running through my head 24/7. I don't think people really understand what it means to be focused on something so trivial all the time.
Right.
Well, it's so interesting too because like it really puts the responsibility on like people who could be victimized to like control the behavior of people who are doing like abusive things with their power. I mean, and I think that like that can be seen on so many different levels in our culture of like all the way from the top that like the people with power are the ones who are victimizing other people, and then it's like left up to the person who's being hurt to like change to make it stop. I mean, I think that can be extended to like the war in Iraq. I think that can be extended throughout history. I think it can be extended all the way down to like walking down the street holding the hand of somebody that you really care about. Like, why should you have to like modify your behavior so somebody else like doesn't come around and hurt you? I mean, it's very bizarre, I think. You know, I'm not in control. I'm not in control of like somebody else's behavior. They are, and they have to be responsible for that. And I thought it was interesting too, like in these comments, like, you know, you come to the university and like, it's like the first time that people are getting to sort of like explore things on their own, you know, to like get some things. And so with each person in that interview, there were so many conflicting statements. It was like, well, I don't personally believe this. I disapprove. I don't think that they should have rights. But then, you know, I don't think they should be discriminated against, and I don't think that they're being discriminated against now. But that's a discriminatory statement to even start with. So how do you go from like already discriminating against people and then being like, well, no, of course you shouldn't be discriminated against. It's just like, how are people hearing that as being different, you know, or like, no, and then once again, back to the invisibility question, like, no, it doesn't happen, I've never seen it, you know? And then it's like, well, maybe not. like maybe you don't see it, but that doesn't
Right.
mean it's not happening,
There, right.
you know? And the one guy was like, well, you know, they're saying something like fag or queer, and he's so uncomfortable
True.
with it because it came from like this really negative space where I'm like, fag and dykes unite, you know, like whatever, I'm proud of it. Like
Right.
that's not an insult to me, but I'll take the power out of it. I just think that was a really good soundbite. That was
Oh yeah,
interesting.
those were very interesting
Yeah.
interviews with those, I think, 3 guys.
Yeah. And I wonder how they would feel if they met us and we sat down and we're like, okay, you know, do you have a problem?
Right.
Like, let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
And most of the time when I see people who are sort of having that like inner struggle of, oh, do I agree, do I not agree, it really just communicates to me that they really don't have an understanding of what the queer movement is and what it's
Sure.
trying to do. And they really sort of are trying to deal with the rhetoric, the anti-gay rhetoric they've been told, and their own sort of, you know, I mean, any one of those guys, if I met them out on the street and talked to them, I'm sure they would, you know, they
Yeah.
would really change their minds to sort of, like anybody else, when you get to know someone on a one-on-one basis, it really sort of starts taking all that out.
Right,
So.
right.
Yeah.
And what you were talking about earlier, Laura, was reminding me of the Take Back the Night thing, you know, for women. You know, we should be able to,
Yeah.
we should be able to walk the streets at night or run or
Yeah.
do whatever. And just like you said, gay people should be able to, it shouldn't be an issue of should they be able to hold hands without being harassed.
Right.
It should be a non-issue. It's like
No,
gay
totally.
people should be able to hold hands, and it shouldn't even come up. But
Right.
obviously, it's, at this point, still in our society,
Mm-hmm.
we're there.
Right.
Although we've come a long way, I feel.
Yeah.
You're young, you don't know.
No,
Just kidding.
no, it's true. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I think for people who are really unaware of history, like history is a very important
Okay.
thing for me.
Yeah. Then you
and
know, of
being
course.
connected, but I didn't
Right.
live it,
Okay,
you know,
yeah.
and that's a totally different experience.
Right.
Like the experience that I'm living today, like I'm really grateful that I've had the people in the past who have like gotten us to where we are now. Like
Right.
we wouldn't be having this show
Yeah,
if
true.
like the feminist movements and the queer movements and like all of the movements that have happened, the civil rights movements, we wouldn't be sitting here right now having this discussion. So,
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's super important to recognize that.
Yeah. And I'm curious, even though the group, the Anti-Violence Project, is relatively new, just you being out in the community and working at Ruby's, I mean, what are the main complaints or things that you hear from people as to what types of harassment is going on?
Oh, you mean like currently or just like in general?
Oh, well, let's say within the last year, what have you
Year?
been hearing in the Iowa City area?
Well, I think like it's like I think people don't go to the physical violence as often as like verbal and emotional abuse occurs, but it really is a range. Like it is anything from, and like I guess that's not true. Like almost all of the instances I can think of may have started with verbal but end up being physically violent. Even like in our own claim spaces of queer spaces, which there really aren't any anymore in Iowa City. Like we used to at least have a queer bar, and now like we don't. And people, since it's like altered its whole standpoint of wanting to be open to everyone, or like we really want straight people to come in, that there has been a lot more violence by straight people against queer people in queer, like in what was a queer space.
Okay.
Like it's not a safe space anymore.
Right.
And I think that like that just happens. That happens all the time. But you know, I don't know if like the political, like the general political atmosphere that's going on in the States right now and the violence that's happening and being supported with the war in Iraq and, you know, all over the world actually, but that there's this real like strong feeling or sentiment of supporting violence that it seems to me that it's created a more violent atmosphere in everyday life for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's like for the video that we just saw with these guys, like saying, well, I don't personally believe that people should be discriminated against, but I don't believe that they should be doing this in the first place, and they should watch out, da-da-da-da-da. It's like people who have that tendency to already become violent will use this whole like momentum of violence to like enact it against people that they don't think should be doing whatever it is that they're doing.
Right.
You know?
Violence has become a solution to the problems
Right.
from the point of view of the current administration. And Yeah, and then of course other people are going to adopt that viewpoint,
Yeah.
at least I feel, just like with the death penalty.
Mhm.
Don't mean to get off on a totally different topic,
No, they're related.
but yeah, it's just, a friend of mine said war is an unimaginative solution to a problem, I mean, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's never been a war to end all wars, like
That's
they like to
true.
tell us, but you know.
right, yes. I just want to pause for a second and remind people again that you're watching Iowa City's Other News on October 4th, 2003. The issue of our show is Being Gay in Iowa City, Is It Safe? And I'm here with guests Laura Crosley and Galen Newton again. And Galen, do you have any comments based on what
I
Laura
think
was
she
saying?
summed that up more articulately than I could ever have. So.
So do you find that you're getting similar, that you get similar complaints? I mean, not very much physical.
I'll kind of talk about like some of the students that I've spoken with in the
Okay,
K through
okay.
12 school district. It's a really weird phenomenon. You have City High and West High, and they're two completely different cultures in
Okay.
themselves. And you have some students who are openly gay, and they go through high school, and they are really enjoying themselves, and they don't really feel threatened, and they have a close group of friends, gay and straight. And they're really enjoying it. And then you have other people that are just really struggling. And I think sometimes faculty of schools tend to look at that one person who tends to do well in school and be like, well, so-and-so's doing well, so everyone must be doing well.
Right.
And it's really hard to sort of overgeneralize what's really going on. You have a policy in place, but I'm sensing that teachers really don't know what to do with that policy at all and how to sort of address certain issues. So, I mean, again, it's mostly verbal name calling, and we have seen some instances of physical attacks, but I mean, that's damaging. You can't focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic if you're just trying to survive the day.
Right,
So,
yeah,
So
the name
true.
calling. Yeah,
so
yeah, mental wounds don't heal usually,
Oh.
physical might.
yeah.
But yeah, the mental anguish goes on and on.
And most of the times, like Laura was saying, people who become physical, it starts with the name calling. It starts with, you know, faggot, dyke in the hall, and then it just goes further and further and further. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know if we've actually yet had resources kind of scrolling across the screen, but I know at some point during the show, we're going to be showing phone numbers of places that, there we go, a couple, people can call. I think that's Iowa City Human Resources, Human Rights Commission, 356-0032, I believe. So that is a number that you can call if you are experiencing harassment. There's Ruby's Pearl number, oh, it's the same number, 248-0032? Okay. To call if you're experiencing harassment, et cetera. Those are two resources to go to get some help and address the issues. Yeah, the K through 12, so you actually, Galen, go into the schools?
no, we don't really,
Okay.
we like to look at it as working with the schools.
Okay.
We're not here to sort of go in and change things around, but really sort of getting the school district to sort of identify their own problems and take those certain situations to make their school district a safer and better place for all of their students.
Okay.
Yeah, we do a lot of things like policy work, teacher sensitivity training. We support GSAs. We don't run GSAs, it's their group, but if they have questions about resources and things, we're definitely there to assist. A lot of the people within GLSEN have run GSAs when they were in high school, so they have a lot of experience when it comes to that. So, and about sort of sharing that with students if they want it.
Right,
So,
okay.
a GSA is a Gay Straight Alliance.
Okay,
so.
okay, there we go, thanks. And we're going to wrap up in a minute here, but I do want to just touch on one question matter. And I think most people know that this happens, but I just want to make sure that we at least address it. The issue of suicides by gay teens, people, just because life does get so bad. Are you guys aware of, like within the last year or so, in the Iowa City area, suicides? I'm not either.
I'm not in touch
Okay,
with
okay.
that.
But I just think it's important for people to know that that is how serious, even just the mental abuse or emotional harassment.
I mean, I think I've heard like statistics of it being really high, like nationwide, but
Right,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, well, we do need to move along to our next segment, so I do want to thank you very much for
Yeah,
coming on the show,
thanks for
both
having
Laura
us.
and Galen, talking about this very important issue. And hopefully we can get people to become more aware and get the community involved
Yeah.
in addressing the issues. Now we're going to move on to our Where's the Outrage segment, today featuring our own intern with us, Holly Berkowitz. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what your outrage is, Holly?
Thank you, Teresa. You know, it's not usual for me to feel outraged, and it's not very easy to feel outraged when you're not very hungry, when you have a full stomach. But America is hungry for oil. And I think this is a very serious issue that we need to tackle, and we need to break through the virtual illusion and mirage that has caused the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. Essentially, the Bush administration has a blueprint for war to seize control of the world's oil resources, called the Project for the New American Century. This project has its roots in the Wolfowitz Doctrine from about 1991 or 1992, around the first Gulf War, and it is a plan to seize control of the global resources for global domination. And Tony Blair said there was no way we could have got the public consent to have suddenly launched a campaign on Afghanistan, but for what happened on September 11th. This is a big statement. He hinted when he said it to the Commons Liaison Committee. The Times reported it July 17th, 2002. And Wolfowitz indeed admitted that after the second invasion of Iraq, that the Iraq invasion was because of oil. The United States needs a new Pearl Harbor, according to the Project for the New American Century, to implement these plans. And it needs a military transformation, that is, to fill the Pentagon with cash. In fact, by the way, where did the $1 trillion of Pentagon money go, guys? I want it back. I want it for Iowa City. Again, it's hard to be outraged on a full stomach, but we need to try. Bush wants war. George Bush wants war, not peace, because he has to fill the private pocketbooks of those who put him into the White House, the weapons, the war profiteers, the weapons dealers, and the oil barons. The PNAC is a blueprint for world domination by the U.S. for control of the oil reserves to satisfy Americans' hunger for oil. We've built consumptive cities, urban sprawl, that cause us to consume more and more oil. So we need war, and the Bush administration has repeatedly violated international treaties and law and the moral law of reciprocity to seize control of the resources. Michael Meacher reported in The Guardian on September 6, 2003, that he believes that the war on terrorism is bogus, that the 9/11 attacks gave the U.S. an ideal pretext to use force to secure its global domination, that is, for oil supplies. We have a lot of erroneous assumptions that many assume that the war in Afghanistan was due to terrorists, but I submit to you that it was the plan for world domination was already in the works at least a year before 2001. It was written, it was presented during the presidential campaign. We want to seize control of the Gulf, Hussein or not, according to project for the New American Century. This includes taking control of Iran and a regime change in China, U.S. Space Forces, control of cyberspace, target specific genotypes and biological warfare to target those with the wrong color of hair color, similar to Hitler. Again, we need to change regime here at home. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Holly Berkowitz. Those are all very important points that people need to be aware of. Thank you very much for that. Now I have with me here the producer of today's show, Stephen Cantor, also a member of Iowa City Council. And so if we want to join him on the screen, there we go. And I was going to ask you, Stephen, do you have any comments or do you want to add anything to the show from earlier about the issue about being gay in Iowa City?
Well, I was just looking at the map you brought about what states have laws on the book about hate crimes, and I was thinking about Iowa. A couple things that are good about Iowa. There's many things that are good about Iowa, but we do have on the books laws against hate crimes. We do have a law against capital punishment. We did recently outlaw ATM fees, which was overruled by the Supreme Court. So those are some things that you say Iowa, progressive state, and it's good to hear. And I think those are the things that draw people in here and make it a welcoming place. Iowa City has some pretty strong laws against discrimination against protected classes, which include gay people based on sexual orientation, along with a number of other protected classes. And we're among a number of cities. I don't think it's that many in Iowa that have that on the books. But so there are a lot of positive things happening that gives one some hope.
Right, for Iowa. In Iowa City, even employees of Iowa City, I believe, can, I guess, take advantage of kind of a civil union type situation where a partner of an employee can have health insurance and whatnot. Is that right?
You can establish
like a domestic partner.
Domestic partnership, and it can be in a heterosexual or homosexual relationship. And it's interesting, the new law that bans people under the age of 19 from bars after a certain time, the exception is if you are with a spouse or someone who, if you're registered as a domestic partner that's over the age of 19, you can go with them. So if you want to try to use that as an excuse, go to it. It's out there. So yeah, Iowa City is very good in a lot of areas. And I appreciate the people that worked on that for a number of years. Okay, good. Now I also, unless you have other things to say on that issue, I know that you've got a couple of upcoming events that you wanted to talk about. Well, just a few things. As I think most of us know, the people that watch this show, the primary elections for city council is coming up. That's Tuesday, October 7th. You can vote early. You can vote on the 7th. And we have a lot of choices for progressive candidates in the two elections that are being contested on Tuesday and then the third one in November. In the general at-large primary election, we have Rachel Hardesty, Holly Berkowitz, who's with us today, Kathy Hudapol and Brandon Ross, who stand out as real strong progressives in the at-large race. So you have some good choices there. In the District C race, you have two pretty strong progressive people in Irvin Fobb and Regina Bailey. And then in the November race, where we'll all get to vote, you have Karen Peace. I think that's District A, is that? And that's... I think so, yeah. She's a very strong, Adam's nodding his head. Progressive, liberal person. So I think they can do a lot of good for Iowa City. It's encouraging to see that, so I encourage people to vote. Our next show is going to be October 18th, and we're going to have some video segments of all the people that made it through the primary or those that want to come in and be taped. Great. And talk about that a little more. So there's some exciting things happening. Right. Okay, are there other events, or I didn't know if you had other events to talk about upcoming? Nothing real that exciting that has to get on there. Okay. And I understand that you were the one actually who kind of
coincidentally ran into the victim of the assault that we've kind of touched on today. So you actually had a chance to speak with some of the people involved in what I'm going to call a hate crime, because I think, based on what I know, it was.
Yeah, it's looking like it is a hate crime, and it's up to the county attorney, although the city police can also put that in their charges, but ultimately, I guess the county attorney, as you know, makes the final decision on what to charge. Talk to the county attorney and to the police chief, and they're discussing it right now. And I think that's the route it will go, in my opinion, but ultimately it's up to them.
Okay.
And I hope they do that.
Right. Yeah, I know when I was up in Lynn County, I was handling a case. It was an assault causing injury, and that's the way it had been charged by the police and by then County Attorney Denver Dillard. But as I reviewed the case, because it was assigned to me, I felt clearly it was a hate crime. So I actually went to Denver Dillard and pointed that out, and he gave me the okay to go ahead, because the county attorney can amend charges at certain points, provided safeguards are still in place for defendants. So yeah, I hope that the evidence, assuming that the evidence is there to make it a hate crime, I certainly hope that it's prosecuted as such, which will mean it's bumped up a segment or bumped up a level of seriousness. So, but maybe it's time to wrap up the show. Unless there are any parting comments, I guess we can.
No, I'm glad we can do a show like this.
Yeah, it's very good. We had two great guests, I think, with a lot of information about local area resources. So anyhow, I want to remind people once again this coming Wednesday night and the following Wednesday at 10 o'clock, feel free to tune in again and watch this episode again. Tape record it. There's a lot of good information on here from both the guests and from Holly Berkowitz about the administration. And also next Saturday, again, you can watch a rerun of this show at 11 a.m. Otherwise, we'll see you back on the 18th of October, I believe, live, where we'll be talking about Iowa City candidates who will be running for election. And we can, I guess, go ahead and roll some credits. Our director today, Greg Thompson, and Elliot on the camera, and Adam back running graphics for us, helping out, and Holly on camera, as well as Where's the Outrage. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you back here in a couple weeks. Thanks.
Take it easy, but take it.
Take it, yeah.
They built this country, for they came from far away to a land they did not know, the same way you do, my friend. So welcome, welcome, Immigrante, to my country, welcome home. Welcome, welcome, Immigrante, to the country that I love. I am proud, I am proud, I am proud of my forefathers, and I sing about their courage, for they spoke a foreign language and they labored with their hands, the same way you do, my friend. So welcome, welcome, Immigrante, to my country, welcome home. Welcome, welcome, Immigrante, to the country that I love. I am proud, I am proud, I am proud of my forefathers, and I sing about their patience, for the work they did was lowly, and they dirtied up their clothes. They spoke a foreign language, and they labored with their hands, and they came from far away to